in the welcome, welcome, welcome. Adapt the canvas. One of the last ones for 2020. Welcome to Adapt the Canvas with me, Kay. Tuesday, a couple of days before Christmas. Let's dive in to the show and let's see where we can go today. Remember, let me know where you're shouting out from. If you are out Christmas shopping, you are on Hiroshima. What's happening, bro? Konnichiwa. Danny Dubplate in the place. Yeah. I'm in Bristol today. It is miserable out there. I'm going to get wrapped up. We're going to dive into today. Gary, man, what's happening? We're going to dive into today's show, which is kind of a roundup of where we've been over the last year. Deepak, what's happening, bro? Richard. Bristol Massive in the house. There's my London crew. Alex, what's going on? Yes, Deepak. Yes, Gary. Londoners in the house. Leeds. Yeah, man. This is nice and sunny in Barcelona. Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Toby, what's happening, man? Zoe. Niall. Neil. Stroud. Just up the road. East London in the place. Yeah. Michelle. What's happening? All right, let's dive in. Actually, let's give it a little bit longer and dive in. Yes, Scotty. So I want everybody to post a question today. We'll get into some questions today. Yes, G. We'll get into some questions today. This is a roundup of what's been going on over the... It's right, Scotty, I'm late today as well. This is a roundup of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. We got some... Marcus in New Zealand. Wow. We got Japan and New Zealand in the house. Wow. Steve. This is an international... Caroline, this is an international broadcast. We are... truly global. This is a global community. This is great. I'm loving it. So today's show really is a roundup of what we've been talking about over the Portugal. Boom. Of what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Over all of the weeks. Abby, what's going on? So we've been diving into lots of areas of thinking, of creativity, of getting results. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your feedback this week. I want to hear what you've been getting from this, how it's changed, how it's helped, what's been going on, and then I'm gonna use that as a way to have a conversation today about what's been happening. And I'm going to touch on some of the areas of what we've been talking about over the last couple of months. Not weeks, months. We've been doing this since May, I think it is. This is probably our 40-plus show. Merry Christmas, Chris, to you. Of progress for you and see where you guys are at. So I'm gonna start, and I want to start and talk about something that we have all as creators have always experiencing, this whole thing about failure. That's been a big topic on this show over the last couple of months. It always seems to come up, and it always seems to have a not so good kind of vibration about it, right? When we think about failing, you get that contraction in the chest. Some of you are feeling it now, maybe in the chest, in the stomach. But one of the other shows that we did quite a while back, we looked at embracing difficulty. And for me, that show is very powerful because difficulties and challenges are always going to be there, right? The question is, what do we do about it? right? I think that's really interesting. Like, what do we do about those situations that come up that seem like they're uncontrollable or outside of our influence, outside of our ability to, control them? What do you do about them? You can do one or two things. You can go with it and go with the flow and let the failure define who you are, right? Or you can choose to, lean into it, right? When I say lean into it, leaning into the difficulty. There's always going to be stresses. There's always going to be situations that are going to test you, right? So what is growth then? What have we been doing on this podcast for the last couple of months, 6 to 8 months, right? We've been pushing ourselves. We've been discovering parts of ourselves that we might not feel comfortable talking about, right? We've been pushing it more and more into the light. Why? Because what stays hidden is uncovered. What stays hidden stays undercover, right? You can't solve a problem if you're not even willing to admit that you have it or that you're going through it. My hope and my wish for what we've been doing over the last couple of months is to bring all this difficulty to the light, right? Let's shine a light on it. Let's have a conversation about it. And let's understand that creators, artists, people who sell their ideas, who are paid for their ideas, have to be more sensitive than someone else in other fields, because we rely on that sensitivity, on that ability to tap into our emotions to get to the heart of the matter, to the story and that's why we get paid for what we do, right? Think about what art really is. You're digging into a finer level of what a story is so that other people can experience it. Other people can tune into that experience and pay money for it, right? That's what the job is, right? At the end of the day, you have figured out a way to transform your ideas into something that someone can experience, and ultimately there is a value exchange. Normally in our society is called money, right? And so that in itself creates stress, anxiety, and that blocks out our creativity. We've talked about the process for the last couple of months and how it transpires. But when that happens, the energy that we normally have to fulfill the task, to get the result, is greatly reduced. And that's when we fail, right? We say we failed, or I'm failing, or I failed. And the process, leaves us with this sort of imprint and an attitude of, well, I can't achieve this thing because last time it happened, X, Y, Z happened. Well, as we've discussed, it's an event that happened, but it isn't you. You're not a failure. Something happened, right? And so this is my new favorite one. My Wednesdays workout guys will know this. Something happened while you were there, right? But it didn't happen to you. It happened while you were there. So it's very interesting to start putting this in its proper place. So we're calling it a reframe, right? And so when you think about reframing your experience, why do we do it? Because you want to empower yourself to keep moving forward even when it's difficult, right? When you have a goal that seems unreachable, when you're trying to get to that next level, all of the things we've been talking about this year have been how to get to that next level, how to keep moving forward through the difficulties that we've been having. Lots of people have been losing their jobs. Lots of people have been working from home. Lots of people have had to transition to Zoom. Lots of people have to transition to another career. Lots of people have had to step into that place where it's uncomfortable on a regular basis, right? And figure out how to keep moving forward. This is where we are as a planet moving forward, going to this next place, right? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge, but people will do it all the time. And we all do it all the time. Somehow we've just compartmentalized the way that we're thinking about how we can achieve it. Well, I do it over there in that area, but I can't do it over here in this area. Well, yes, you can. You have one brain, one mind, right? And that one brain and one mind deals with everything the same way. So there's a saying, how you deal with one thing is how you deal with everything, right? So if you tune into that, what I just said, how you deal with one thing is how you deal with everything, tune into that, and then find the, hi Francis, and find your deeper meaning of that, right? When you really find the deeper meaning of that, you'll start seeing that your behavior is the same in all these different areas of your life, right? Where you behave with your money, you behave with your relationships, how you behave with your job, how you behave with your kids. There is a similar pattern, and there is a ceiling on that pattern, and that ceiling on that pattern tells you how far you can go to that next level, right? And that would be a conversation that you're having with yourself that is shown to you through a picture. So it'll either be a still picture or a moving picture, or it'll be audio, and it will be something that happened that will remind you of the experience. And as you're feeling all these emotions, and this is what happens when you're in flow, you feel all these emotions. But if you're in flow, if you're just about to hit that sweet spot in creativity, you're just about to make that wicked bass line, you're just about to write that amazing line in a song, you're just about to design that amazing image or dress or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you have the feeling, right? Now you're consumed with the feeling, and now you're out of flow, right? And that's the creator's dilemma, right? To get to that next level, there's an assumption that you have to give up something, right? And that giving up something is what that conversation is about, and the experience comes up and blocks the creative flow. And now you can't get to that next level because you're in your emotions, you're in this conversation that's stopping you from allowing that juices to flow and just get you past where you've been before, and so that you're in that present moment, you're totally out of the game. And some of us know what this is like, because you will have a moment where you're just like the deer in the headlights, right? You're just about to break through. So if you know what I'm talking about, send me some yes, Kay, I get it, right? Or this happens to me, right? Because you'll get this rush of emotion, right? It's an intense feeling that takes over what it is that you're observing in that moment. And it can be quite intense, right? Here's the thing, right? Here's the thing that I haven't really spoke about on any of the sessions that we had. When you feel that feeling, right, it is not an indication of whether you're going to be successful or not, right? And this is the powerful thing to get it. That feeling and emotion that you have that comes up and it's so overwhelming is not, right, an indication of whether you can be successful or not. Right? That's really powerful to get, because that feeling is just that. It's just the feeling. The feeling happens. Now we are going to put our memories and emotion on top of the feeling, and now, based on the history of the feeling and how I approach that feeling throughout my past, I'm going to say, right, what's going to happen next. I'm the one that's saying, oh, I don't want to go to that next level, or it reminds me of something that's going to happen on that. Like, that's me. That's not the feeling. The emotion and the feeling is just that. It reminds you of something, but the memory of it still doesn't say you can't go to that next level, right? It's just a memory, and it's just emotion. And so somewhere in all of our experience, we can untangle those two things, right? Because the future is always here. The future is always coming towards us, and you can reach the future that you want to create. You've done it before, right? And you can do it again. The feeling that you're having and the emotion that you're having right now is just that, right? You've always had that. Somehow you found a way to get through it on different levels. This is the same sort of challenge. So, boom, let's bring it back to embrace the difficulty, right? When was it really difficult and you still found a way through? That's the question. When was it really difficult and you found a way through? Right? Think about that. It's difficult. It was a stressful experience. Something happened that challenged you, but on some level, you found a way to get through that. Right? I'm going to leave it there. But that story that we're telling ourselves about that feeling, is it true? Right? Is it true? And so that's our story about failure. That's what we talk to ourselves about. Because how often do you have these conversations with some close friends, people you know, about failing, about the feelings that you have that you can't necessarily describe? And so if this is the first sort of time you're actually hearing an explanation of this feeling, then, put something in the chat so we know. But this isn't sort of like something that we openly have discussions about. I certainly wouldn't talk about this. I wouldn't have talked about this years ago. I didn't have the vocabulary for it. I didn't know how to explain it. But since doing my coaching and mentoring over the years, I've begun to understand that process. And once I've been able to go back and look at my own experience and how I've been able to get through these difficulties, it's really shone a light on that and what people can actually do to get through it. And so, do I still have those feelings? Of course I do. Of course I do. I have different tools now to be able to help myself get through the difficulties. And I think in next year, 2021, I'm going to do a show episode specifically on the album and what I went through to create it. And you've all heard my story of Coded Language and what I went through to create Coded Language, staying up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on my treadmill, trying to stay calm to get to that next level. It happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. And if you're really passionate and you got an idea about something that you want to share and get out to the world, I think, sometimes it can affect you more because you're so passionate about getting this result out. But here, what the point I'm trying to make here is, it is not the end if you can't do that. You just have to find another way through. You're in the maze, the great maze of creativity, and you've just hit a dead end. So just track back and go a different way, right? Excuse me. So track back and go a different way and keep moving. There is a solution to get through that. So last week we talked a lot about experimentation, and the real story about experimentation is that that's the thing that solves problems, right? Think about it. Experimentation is what we do when we're learning to talk. We're experimenting with different tones, different sounds, different ways to move your mouth, to move your tongue, breathing patterns. All of that is designed so that we can get a word out, right? And you do it quite unconsciously, and at such a young age, right? That it seems normal, but it's very complex, right? Think about learning another language now, right? Think about, what would you do to learn another language now, right? And imagine what you did to learn the language when you were a child, right? Think about what you did when you were learning to walk. These are all processes of experimentation that we just take for granted, right? We just oh yeah, I can walk. Oh yeah, I can talk. It's fascinating when you really start drilling down into it, because what tends to happen is that when someone is creating something and they want to, even in the process of creating it, you're still experimenting, right? Even if you're copying someone else, it's still an experiment to a degree, right? You still had to, find something that you like, then figure out how to copy it, then figure out what they did so you could copy it. If it's music, it's sound for sound. If it's writing, it's word for word. There's still a basic level of experimentation on there. You can up that. There's lots of different tools to do experimentations. One person I would definitely put you onto is Edward de Bono, the guy that coined the phrase lateral thinking. So that guy is, yes, Gav, new language gets you out of your comfort zone. Very, very powerful. Edward de Bono and lateral thinking, his books and his tools for helping you think differently are amazing. Really straightforward, really simple to understand. He uses lots of diagrams and illustrations to help you think differently. You know, that's another a trick of creativity, is that human beings do not think in letters, sentences. We don't think in languages. We think in symbols, pictures, and images. So when you're trying to solve a problem, it would be wise to start drawing it, creating diagrams, using different pens, going back to being a child, right? Lots of creative thinkers use this way of solving problems because they know that the mind thinks in images. The mind thinks in colors, sounds, images, moving pictures. The mind does not think in words, in letters, right? And that's why hieroglyphics are so powerful. That's why logos are so powerful. If I said to you, what's the swoosh sign, right? Everyone knows it's the Nike swoosh, right? But when you think about the Nike swoosh, that Nike swoosh represents Michael Jordan. It represents, you know, trainers. It represents high-performing athletes. It represents football teams, basketball teams, baseball teams, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods. Like, all of those ideas are embodied in that swoosh, right? Because it's a symbol. And in that symbol is buried deep multiple meanings. Same thing with the Apple logo. Same thing with any logo. The logo itself is imbued, is got the depth of the story just in that one symbol. You know, we could do a whole essay on what Apple means just by looking at the logo, right? And so that's how, in our minds, we can conceptualize an idea just by looking at a symbol. It's very, very powerful. And that's how we learn. So, how do we want to take this idea forward? Well, create experiments, right? Think about an area where you are underperforming. Think about a place where you want to go in the, visual music, visual language, Nike, Goddess, or Victory. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So think about where you are stuck, right? Think about this place where you're stuck, the level where you are feeling held back, right? And then draw it, right? Mind map it. Have a conversation about it, right? Think about what it is that is holding you back, right? And then visualize it. Make it into a game. See yourself in a maze and see certain solutions that can come from it, right? So that's 6 ideas I've just given you in less than 1 minute, right? Draw it, mind map it, visualize it, create a maze, create symbols, have a dream about it, right? Write down a dream about it, right? When you attack a situation from multiple different angles, you are seeing and you are feeling and you are sensing something that is multidimensional that can be accessed through different ways of being, doing, seeing, hearing, like you have your whole being, right? You have your whole being. When someone says they're stuck, what exactly are they saying, right? If you are stuck right now, have a look around you and tell me where you are stuck, right? How are you stuck? And what particularly part of you is stuck? And you will see that there is nowhere that is stuck. It's something that you have imagined in your mind. So therefore, to solve the problem, we need to imagine a different solution, right? We need to imagine some different scenario. And how do we do that? Well, we experiment with all of these ideas that we've been talking about for the last 6 to 8 months. We throw all these ideas at the wall, right? We get some colouring pens, we get some mind map tools. You can even do it with some other person, right? And that other person could play devil's advocate, asking you gentle prodding questions. Like a simple question that simple answer to every question that someone says is, how do you know it's true? Oh, I feel stuck. How do you know it's true? I don't. Well, how do you know that's not true? Well, I haven't really thought about it. Well, how do you know that that's true? Because what we're doing is that we're prodding the mind to start thinking differently, right? We're prodding the mind to start thinking in a new way that it generally might not be used to thinking in, right? And why is that important? Because a stuck state is a thought, a thought that's thought persistently over time. The same thing. That becomes the place where you're stuck. Just like if you were in a car and you were in mud and you started spinning the wheels, the more you spin the wheels, the deeper you go in the same place. Right? You haven't solved the problem and you haven't moved forward. You're just going over and over the same thing in the same space and you're not making any progress. Okay, so we want to try something different, right? And how would you get out of that mud, right? You wouldn't just keep revving the engine, right? After a while, you'd figure this isn't working. And then what should we try to do next? Okay, so that's experimentation. That's something that we've been talking about since the beginning in many different ways. When you hit a dead end, turn back and go a different way. Yeah, very, very true. Very, very simple as well, right? You go a different way. What would that mean in a creative process? What would that mean if you were designing a piece of art? It wasn't working. How would you go back and go a different way? If it was a piece of music, how would you go back and do it a different way? If it is a piece of graphic design, how would you go back and do it a different way? Something that I got from a jazz keyboard player, and I'll remember his name in a minute, but I was in the studio and I was in a sort of creative slump. And the story that I heard was that a guy had got the keyboard and it was, the white keys and the black keys were facing towards him. What he did is he got the keyboard and he turned it around so the black and white keys were facing away from him, and then he started to play the keyboard that way, right? And it was like, when I started to do that, I was like, wow. It was nuts because I was playing the same things I normally play with the other way around, but when it was facing away from me and I was playing the same thing, it was a different notes were coming out, right? And so that was a fun exercise to do for the afternoon. It kind of got me thinking differently. It made me play different notes in a different way. And so it kind of just opens up your creative. But I'm in my studio and I'm thinking, well, where else can I apply this, backwards or upside down knowledge, right? And it was just something so simple. And so there are millions of different ways to solve your problem and to experiment and to do stuff differently. And the Edward de Bono books are great for that. The one I would definitely advise is lateral thinking, because it really opens up your way of seeing the world in a different way. So if you all know what lateral thinking is, that's the process of thinking sort of laterally, meaning not sequentially, not like A is B is C is D. Lateral thinking is like A could go to Z, Z could go to W, and W could go to P, right? Why would you do that? Well, you would do that so that you break up the patterns and the monotonous way of thinking that you were probably in and that produced the same results all the time, right? So the way of seeing the world can drastically change by just changing the order of reality itself, changing the order of how you perceive reality, right? A simple thing like just taking the way that you see things in a different order or saying them in a different order breaks up the pattern, right? So the next thing what we talked about over the last couple of weeks is taking risks. So we've just talked about two things that potentially bring up a lot of emotion, right? And stop us from taking a risk, right? Think about that. Failure, a lot of emotion. Experiment, a lot of emotion, right? Emotion, right, is what's stopping us from taking a risk. The feeling, It's what's stopping us from taking a risk. So think about that. What is going on? Yes, yes, Ross. Edward de Bono's 5 Thinking Hats. Yes, very, very powerful book. So think about that, where if you were at that point where we've just talked about 2 things, and my list has got another 9 or 10 things on it, and you're already feeling anxiety, you're already feeling stress, right? You're already in your emotions. You know, hands up, how many, as we've been talking about this, have been remembering certain experiences, or you've been triggered, right? And this is very, very powerful, because when you think about the type of conversation we're having that triggers you, right? It's very good. You're sort of you can see how just thinking about these things, right, has an effect on you, right? And if that's the case, then you can do some ways to experiment to sort of start shifting yourself, because one of the best ways to solve a problem, right, is to get into the problem, get into the feeling of the problem, and then you can start seeing different ways of trying to solve it, right? Because you've activated it, right? So here's one of the skill sets, like you've been activated. Now sit in it, sit in that space that's giving you that feeling. Now you can just slow down your breathing, you can calm down, you can relax. And in that state, you can ask yourself a few different questions, you know. What could I do differently now, you know, this feeling is here? You know, how can I, right? And the how can you question, it's way more powerful than why am I feeling this way, right? So we want to ask ourselves, how can I solve this problem feeling? And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I forget the guy's name, but he's got some really great tools for solving these types of problems, thinking that type of way. I'm not going to get too deep into that today. But taking a risk, right? Putting ourselves into a vulnerable position, right? Basing it on what we've just talked about, taking a risk could produce failure, right? Failure, we could call that feedback as well, right? Because that would be very useful. Reframe, feedback, and then an experiment, because we don't know the outcome of where it is that we're going, but we want to move forward and we want to create progress. So we're gonna what would be the smallest risk that you could take? What could be the smallest experiment that you could take? Right? So now we've circumvented the whole thing and we've brought it right back down to the smallest element, the element of risk that you could take, right? So think about that. Most people, when they're thinking about what their project is or their goals are, or why they haven't reached this next part of their life, right? Whether it be, you know, your job, your personal life, your career, financial, you're looking at this big overarching thing, and to try and solve it from that perspective, this big overarching thing can be overwhelming. And when it's that overwhelming, what do you tend to do? Shut down. It's too big to deal with, so I'll just shut down. What is the smallest thing that you can do? What's the smallest thing that you can do that keeps you moving forward? Right? So we're now going to break it down into its smallest form so that we can keep moving forward, right? Very, very different from seeing it from this big perspective. What is the smallest perspective, right? If you want to upgrade your career next year and get a pay rise, or start your own business, take your career to that next level, what is the smallest part of that puzzle that you can attack right now? Forget looking at the whole picture. Forget trying to solve the whole picture, trying to get all the way to the end. Let's start with what we have, right? And what would the one piece in the puzzle be that you could do today? What's the one piece in that puzzle that you could do today, that you could tackle today? Too true, Justin. I like that. So think about that. What is the smallest piece you can take on with that, right? So is that then a risk? If you could take on a smaller part of that, is that then a risk? Is that a risk if you just do a smaller portion of that? What's the smallest part that you can take on with that, okay? So really and truly, we're bringing it back to stuff that we can handle, right? Because when it's so big, it's so like, oh, it's too big for me, you know? I don't have the skill set, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the experience. You do. Let's bring it back to the experience, the knowledge, and the skill set that you do have so that you can take action on something, right? The door, when it opens, it's going to lead you somewhere. You have a skill set, right, that can open the door. You have a skill set that can lead you to take one step. So take that one step and then see where that goes. So over the last couple of months, we've been drilling down into the mindset, right, the creator's mindset. And so all these things are mindset tools. All these things are ways to help us think differently, ways to help us shape the way that we think differently. And so think about, where do you want to be in 2021? What's that going to look like for you, right? How do you want 2021 to be for you, right? Think about where you've come from, 2020. What a year that we've had, right? What did you do when all this stuff was going on? What actions were you taking? What actions weren't you taking? What beliefs did you have? What was your attitude towards towards 2020, right? What was your beliefs about what you were capable of, right? This is all mindset stuff. This is like, what do you believe you can accomplish, and what did you do on a day-to-day basis? Either A, to up your game, B, to allow the situation to control you, C, plan to take it to the next level, right? All mindset. This is all beliefs, all mindset. It's like, what are you capable of? How are you thinking and believing what your next moment's going to be, right? What is it that you have accepted, or are you open to, or do you want to learn about, right? It's all mindset, right? So what did you do with your mindset, and what are you willing to do to improve your mindset, right? Let's use another word, attitude. Attitude. What is your attitude to difficulty, to challenge, to, pushing yourself in that space where it is uncomfortable, but where is the place to grow, right? Think about, where do you do your best work, really and truly, right? When you're back, who performs better when they're on a deadline and they're going to be late, right? Think about that. When you're on a deadline and you're going to be late, do you sometimes just pull it out the bag, right? I'm like that. I'm one of those guys that, I know it's not a conscious thing that I'm doing, but I'm generally right up against it, and then all of a sudden something magic happens. And so I'm recognizing that in myself, right? I'm just allowing that to be. That's my process. How do I get better at that? Well, I've started to do, take more notes. I've started to, get a process in a way that I don't quite leave it to the last minute, but I still, I'm one of those guys that when I'm supposed to have finished a record, I'll send it in on the actual day that it's supposed to be, mastered, and I'm sending it directly to the cutting house because, it's never really finished until it's finished, and even when it's mastered, it's not really finished. If you've had that experience, it's never really finished until it's really, 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 really finished. But that's just because there's always more that can be added to make it better. But mindset. What is your mindset for 2021? Like, what are you going to do better than you did in 2020, right? what are you going to do? What 3 or 4 things are you going to do that's going to boost you to that next level, right? What are you going to do? So look back over all of the sessions that we've talked about over the last 8 or 9 months, and we have discussed so many new ways to form habits, new ways to break patterns, ways to think differently, and even in all the comments as well, there's so many great ideas, so many great conversations that people have been having. This in itself is a wealth of knowledge, of information about the creator's mindset and how to update your mindset, how to get to that next level, what to think about, how to think about it, what books to read, what courses to go on. We have a great platform, Wednesday's Workout, where creators share their ideas every Wednesday. You're welcome to come and join us. My email to find out more is disruptivek@gmail.com. You're more than welcome to reach out and you're more than welcome to reach out and find out how you can join, and gmail.com, and find out more information and see if it's right for you. We do this every Wednesday. It's a great platform for people to share, learn and grow and take their projects to that next level. So, that platform's there to encourage and help and bring like-minded people together. So I saw a comment earlier when someone said, it's better to do with like-minded people. Absolutely. Why do you think I'm here every Tuesday having this conversation with you guys? I'm in the whole conversations. I'm all about the creative conversations. I'm listening to what everyone's saying on the platform, and it's amazing to see the growth of the community, how far and wide it's traveling and how it's spreading, because we're all creators. We're all in the process of upgrading on some level or not, right? We're learning different tools, different strategies. People have sent me in books, music, stuff that's just helped me and sort of helped shape the direction of these talks and these workshops, and helped me understand, where to take these next conversations about the creative's dilemma. And that's kind of basically what this is, right? The creative dilemma, right, is what do we do with our art, right? How do we get our art to that next level? So we've talked about failures, experiments, taking risks, the mindset, is taking risks the same as a leap of faith, right? So the leap of faith is that belief that what you're going to do is going to work, right? And this is what most people have trouble with, because human beings want confirmation from other human beings that what we're doing is right. But the leap of faith says that, I know what I know, right? And I'm going to bet on myself. And I'm just going to jump and see what happens. And that leap of faith, right, takes you to that next level. That leap of faith is something that is is hardwired in you, in your belief system, that it's like no one can talk you out of it. And you can't explain it to someone else, right? It's like that bit in The Matrix when Neo knows, right, what he knows. He's just had that realization, and Tank says it's never been done before. And he says that's why it's going to work, right? It's because he knew in his own mind, right? He'd come to that realization, to a knowing that he would make it work. He would do whatever it was going to required of him to make it work. And that's the leap of faith. It can't really be explained. It's just this feeling and a knowing. And when you have that feeling and that knowing, and you just do that thing, right? You just do the task, you just do the thing, and it works for you. It's because everything about you, right, was like a confirmation that this task was going to be made, it was going to work the way that you saw it's going to be made possible. And you put everything you did, everything you are into that, and it happened, right? And so that leap of faith, will need you more than anything to believe it, to see it, to know it inside that is possible. And so that's not something you share with everybody, right? Because it's such a personal thing that sharing it with everybody diminishes it. You're looking for approval for your imagination. You're looking for approval for something that you believe in. You're looking for approval for your dreams. You're looking for approval for your, vision, right? And so look at all the great visionaries that have ever accomplished anything in their lives. They didn't seek approval from the masses, right? Because we all know that the masses can't see what that next level of the future is, right? The masses generally just want it faster, stronger, and cheaper, right? A true leap of innovation, a true leap to that next step, that next level, comes from a lone visionary, right? Who's been in their space, going over and over this dream, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand why it's come to them, or why are they the person that's got to, and they're sometimes excited, they're sometimes scared, sometimes frightened, but they've just got this feeling inside that just will not go away, right? And I know, right, that there's lots of people out there who's been thinking about taking that leap of faith, right? And you're looking for security before you take that leap. The security is in the leap. The security is in your story. The security is in the fact that you are having the vision, that you are having this thing that's not going away. That's the security, right? You have to now test it by just taking the leap, or doing the smallest part of the leap that makes you feel comfortable, so that you can get the reassurance you need to say, fuck it. I'm just going to dive in all the way now. Right? And when you see, feel, and hear all of those things make sense, that's when it happens, right? So think about it. It's like when you know that the only time to get to that next level is to make mistakes, is to experiment, right? We could say that as well. Failure, feedback, failure, make mistakes, failure, experiment, right? We know there's going to be some sort of experimentation, right? We know that there's going to have to be some risk taken in there. You have to do something different, because if you do the same thing all the time, the same thing will happen all the time. Right? The same thing will happen all the time if you do the same thing all the time. If you're frustrated that you're not making progress, it's because you're doing the same thing all the time. You're doing the same job, you're having the same conversations, you're in the same relationships. The money's the same way you travel to work. Remember, how you do one thing is how you do everything. When you start drilling down to that, you'll start to see there's a pattern, there's a habit, and then you'll have your aha moment, right? You'll have your realization, right? And then you'll understand it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen because you need to break through. And there's generally a breakdown before the breakthrough, right? And so that's the process of thinking. And then we come to this leap of faith. There's not much of a leap of faith after that. After you've assessed all of those situations, you should be confident now. To other people, it seems like there's a leap of faith happening, but you should be confident after you've gone through those processes. It's just a step over the road, a step over the threshold. You just step over it and see what happens. You're still experimenting. You haven't got the result. So everything we've talked about is still an experiment. There's a leap of faith. I'm experimenting. There's a breakthrough. There's a change in the mindset. I'm still experimenting. If you don't like where you're heading, you can come back. Right? If you don't like this new place that you've created, then go back to the other place where you're comfortable. Right? See it as a game. It's like visiting a new city, right? Travel to a new city by yourself, right? If you don't like it, you can go home. You don't have to stay there. So this is what we're talking about. Breaking the habit, breaking the thoughts. Go to this new place and test it. See what it's like, right? And then we know, right? To do all of this, we have to take responsibility of all of this. And responsibility just means you have the ability to respond to the circumstances that you are creating. Very, very powerful distinction, because before, responsibility would be like, oh, when something goes wrong, I'm the one that has to take responsibility for it. Well, that's true, but the other part of that is if you have the ability to respond even when you're not sure, if you have the ability to respond even though you think it's a risk, if you have the ability to respond even though you don't believe that the outcome's going to give you what you want, if you have the ability to keep responding, there's going to be feedback, right? And with that feedback, you can keep responding with your ability, right? Check it out. You can keep responding to the uncertain stimulus that's coming towards you. You can keep responding to that with your ability, right? Because you have the ability to keep moving when you're not sure what's going to have happen, right? And that's what this whole process is about. Failure, when it means like there's not, when you fail and you just give up, that's when you stopped taking action, right? And there's two types of that process. You stopped taking action because you didn't know what was going to happen, and it was like, oh, I'm just going to stop and I'm not going to go any further. Or you couldn't see. There's two types of people. The other person, they couldn't see what was going to happen either, and they were failing, but they didn't stop, right? So different person, they couldn't see the answer either. They didn't know what was going to be next. They kept failing, but they didn't stop. The failing didn't stop them. The failing just told them that they needed to try something else while they were moving forward. They kept momentum up and they kept trying different things and they kept moving forward, right? So they kept taking risks. But it didn't make them stop. It didn't make them feel like they couldn't go further. So let's bring it full circle, full cycle, back to the beginning. When you have that failure feeling, that is not an indication that you cannot go further, right? That's not something that says to you, no, you're not going to make it. Don't go any further. It's just the feeling that's overwhelming you in the moment, and that's taking you off course. Professional firefighters run towards the fire, right? Think about that. It's counterintuitive to human instincts, which is to run away from danger. So they have been trained to go against their human nature, go against their emotions, which says run from danger. They run towards it. Soldiers run towards bullets. Right? Think about that. They are trained to run towards bullets. So think about what you can accomplish with the skill set that we've been discussing over these many, many months. Time to put it into practice and look at where the place where you most held back. And so if you are not getting to your dream reality, your dream goal, your dream career, your dream financial income, your dream relationship, the place to look at is in the one place you've been avoiding looking at. That is the place that's going to give you the most bang for your buck. And with all the tools that we've been speaking about over the last 8 or 9 months, that would be the area I would concentrate all of my energy, right, into that one area. And that's, as I'm saying it, maybe some of you now are having that aha moment. You're having that feeling like, yeah, I know exactly what Kay's talking about, but I'm not ready to look at that. That would be the first place to look at to make the biggest transition to the next level. And so very, very powerful putting all of these ideas together, because now we can see, we've got still more to talk about, but we're reaching the top of the hour now, or the bottom of the hour. And so I'm just going to quickly go through the last couple of ones. But the future is forward. That was a show that we talked about looking at the future and understanding that we are moving towards our goals. We're moving towards something new. And what's come before that is preparation for that. So what is learning? What is growth? What are we really here to do is to make progress. How do you make progress? Well, you learn by your mistakes, right? And so if you want to make progress really quickly, make more mistakes and change that to an experiment. Have lots of experiments, right? So totally different way of starting to think and reframing the language, because language is the way that we can create our future, right? We're saying the words, oh, that's not for me, that's stressful, I don't believe that's going to work. You've just languaged all of these things with memory, with an experience. Now you're putting it in front of you instead of leaving it behind you. So 80% of what you know is holding you back. So we've had the discussion about it's 80% psychology and 20% mechanics. And so the 80% psychology is what we think we know is what's holding us back. So yeah, when you're having a conversation with somebody, notice when they say, yeah, I know. They've just stopped themselves from learning something new. And notice where you do that. When someone's talking to you about something you know nothing about, and you're trying to stop yourself from feeling, looking like, you don't know anything, and you don't want to be embarrassed. You go, yeah, I know. You just stops yourself from learning, right? One of the greatest gifts, right, of communication is to shut up, right, when you don't know. When you're around people who got wisdom and knowledge, soak it up, right? If you don't know something, it's cool. That's why you're there. The universe has put you together so you can learn something from someone who does know, right? So use that as a gift and just shut up and listen. Don't pretend you know because you feel embarrassed. That's the ego stopping you from progressing, right? So just humble yourself and know you're having a free lesson, right? And that's one of the beautiful things around hanging around really successful people is they love to talk. Let them talk, right? Let them talk and ask them questions about how they got there. What was the most challenging thing you went through? What did you learn? Right? What can you share? And you'll be surprised. They'll tell you what was their most challenging thing. They'll tell you what was their most difficult thing and how they got through it. And you can use that wisdom, right? And so that's the 80% psychology, right? 80% mindset, right? That's what we're doing. Most people on here are proficient with the technology. I don't think I've met anybody in 20 years of doing this coaching that wasn't proficient in the technology side of it, on the doing side, right? And the mechanics, right? Most people know how to use the software, the computers, the technology side. The downside is the ideas or the mindset they approach stuff with, right? That's the difference. How are you approaching the technology? What's the mindset that you're bringing to the table, right? So when you start examining that, you'll start to see in any leadership position, in any business or creative endeavor where there's teams of people, the bottleneck is the leader. The bottleneck is the leader, the person with the vision or not, right? We spoke about what I've learned from making all those LPs, and most of what I shared on that session was to do with failures, right? And how I came back from those failures, how I came back from those setbacks. And when you think about it, what do you do if you're self-employed, even if you're in a business and you're employed in a family situation? What are you doing every day? You're solving problems. Think about what a business actually is. It's just it's a vehicle for you to get a product out into the world. The first hurdle you overcome is what's the idea, and then you go about figuring out what the idea is, and then getting it to the people that want to buy it. Then you got to figure out how to package it. Then what price point? Then how do you deliver it to the people? What service should and it goes on, and it's a series of problem solving, right? So that's what the albums have been for me. They're a series of problems that need to be solved. Technical problems, conscious problems, unconscious problems, creative problems, problems about how to structure songs, how to unstructure it, problems in how to stop thinking the same way and how to think differently. Sets and different ways of being to get to that next level are subsections of problems. And when someone says I'm stuck, especially when I spoke about that being stuck in my album process, I'm talking about I needed to rethink. I needed to change the way I was thinking, change a habit that I was stuck in because that's the way I knew to get a result. And so very, very powerful session that we had that time. And again, embracing the difficulty. We had a whole show on the ideas, and there was like 25 ideas that we had that were around embracing the difficulty, and subsequently loads of ideas that came from that. And that session came about from watching the Netflix documentary on coaches. And so looking at coaches and so there was a football coach on there was a basketball coach on there, a baseball coach on there, but watching those coaches and breaking down what they were learning. And so, a very, very powerful show that was for me, because it really helped me understand a lot about my own process, my own thinking, and hopefully it stimulated you guys as well. And so the other thing was about motivation, right? The motivation to keep going. We've been, some of you have been with me since the beginning. That's like over 45 shows, right? 45 episodes, maybe more, I'm not sure, but we've been doing it since May. Some of you have been with me since then. Some of you who are on here have been doing the Wednesdays workout, the private group that we do on a Wednesdays. You've been doing that for almost a year now. Like, what is the motivation for keeping going? For me, I know what my motivation is. What is your motivation for keeping on coming back, right? How can you now use that motivation to go through some of these tasks, mental tasks that we've talked about, right? Because you're not stuck, you just need to think differently, right? But you need to have that motivation to keep pushing you when you feel stuck, when you feel like it's difficult, when you feel like you want to give up, which is the time that you want to put in that extra effort. And the most rewards you'll get is when you push through and you want to give up. You will have such a breakthrough. You'll be so liberated. You'll feel so free, so powerful, because that teaches you one of the biggest lessons you'll ever learn in your life is that even at your lowest point, victory is a decision away. Very, very, very powerful. I'll say that again. Even at your lowest point, victory is just a decision away, right? And that is where we're going to leave today's show, because that says it all. Even in your lowest point, victory is a decision away, right? So, thank you everybody for tuning in this week. It has been another blockbuster show where we've just summed up, we've taken stock of 2020, of all the shows that we have, not all of them, but some of the shows that we've discussed, and there are plenty more that we could definitely dive into. I just want to let you guys know about Lost Horizons showcase tonight, which is my live stream with Lost Horizons. It's going to be on. It's a VR set. So if you guys have seen any of the trailers for the show tonight, it's going to be amazing. We were joined with James Lavelle, Unit, DJ Flight, and Sherelle, And tonight's show is going to be off the chain. We're going to be doing a virtual reality show, one of the first ones that I've certainly done, and it's going to be amazing. So check it out tonight. You can still get tickets for it. It starts at 7 p.m. I'll put a post up on my Facebook page, but it's Lost Horizons, and you can just type that in Google and it will come up. It's a VR showcase, and tonight at 7 p.m. Unit starts, James Lavelle and DJ Flight, and then myself. It's going to be an amazing show. So check that out. It's going to be great. And so thank you all for tuning in and being a part of Adapt the Canvas. We are going from strength to strength. We're reaching New Zealand and Japan, Portugal, America. We are definitely a global community. And like I said last week, when I was really amped up, was because we're going to be doing this stuff live in 2021. So that's still, going to, be the forefront of my goals that I'm going to be working towards for 2021. So if you guys want to join me for a live session, Adapt the Canvas live in Bristol and in London next year, we'll head out to New York as well. Definitely Japan, Tokyo. We'll make this a global thing, and we're going to be taking this worldwide. Adapt the Canvas Global. Just sounds amazing, right? So thank you all for tuning in again, and have a great Christmas, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday, for another Adapt the Canvas. Have a great week, have a great Christmas, and have a great holiday. So see you all. Namaste.